Welcome to Studies in the Truth. I am Brother Mitch.
Hello again. We're going to talk about a principle today that the church really doesn't understand. They are under this delusion that the law cannot be kept, that you're somehow, when you have to obey the law, you have to keep it perfectly because of misunderstandings of things said in the New Testament. We're going to go to Ecclesiastes 3, verses 14 and 15, and we're going to talk about these two verses and what they mean, and it'll help shine some light on some things. Ecclesiastes 3, verse 14 says, I know that whatsoever God doth, it shall be forever. Nothing can be put to it, nor anything taken from it. And God does this, that man should fear before him. This is from the King James Version, of course. And what it really is trying to tell us, it says, I'm going to retranslate it in a way to hopefully help you understand. It says, I know that the whole of what Yah has done or declared will exist forever. Nothing can be added to it. That can also be argued against it. And nothing can be removed or diminished from it. And Yah has done this so that man would fear or reverence him. So it's really trying to tell us that Yah set a standard of what he calls righteousness, that all men who reverence him or fear him are to live by, and that this standard is forever. It never changes. It was set in place. This is the truth, this is the standard, and it shall never change. It'll be the same forever, so that men won't be confused from whatever time or culture or language they're from. It's always the same simple standard. This is always going to be true. It's not just what he did, but it's what he said. It's about the law. It's about the promises. It's about all those things. Once he said something, it will come to pass. It also, when it says take away from, that word can mean diminish, remove, diminish. The actual meaning is to scrape off, but it has to do with not just the laws, like some people say, well, there's only 2 commands, or there's only 10 commands, or there's, this kind of command, or that kind of command, and this command applies, but that command does not. This is specifically saying that's not true. It's the same forever. It doesn't change. It can't be added to or taken away from. And so it's this way so that all men at all times and all places would know how to serve him, Yah, the way Yah wants to be served, the way he expects to be served. And so not only can you remove anything from it, but its authority doesn't diminish. The law has the same authority in the life of believers today as it did when Moses gave it, when Yahweh gave it to the people through Moses. It applied according to Leviticus in 19:34 and 35 and Numbers 15 and 16. It applied to both the native-born Israeli and the Gentile or stranger who joined with Israel in covenant with Yahweh. If a Gentile joined in covenant with Israel to serve Yahweh, the law applied to both equally. It's the same. The New Testament's saying the exact same thing, but because the teachers of the New Testament don't want to live by the Old Testament law, and they misunderstand Paul, their heart, their lack of desire to serve him the way he wants to be served, has blinded them to the requirements to serve him in that way. It's one of the mysteries of the word, or how you feel towards it determines what you get from it. He goes on to say, noises, all kinds of noises. My dog is outside the door, so if you hear rattling chains, please ignore it. Where do I want to go next? In Matthew 5:17, Messiah says, do not think that I came to destroy the Torah or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to complete. This word destroy means to loosen down. And it's really talking about authority. He's not talking about removing a command. He's talking about loosening down. The authority of the scripture has not changed. The authority of the law in the lives of believers has not changed in Messiah. Messiah did not come to diminish or destroy the authority of the law in the lives of people. But people think that because of things Paul says about the law no longer has authority over us in the sense that we're no longer under the law. They don't understand what that under the law means. There's two different kinds of authority the Torah has, okay? The Torah has the authority of being the only standard of righteousness that a man can live by. That's true. But since nobody has lived by it except Messiah, okay, the law took the authority to condemn us to death when we disobeyed it. Okay? But our belief in Messiah has removed the condemnation of death. So the law no longer has authority to condemn us, okay, if we unintentionally violate it, but it still has the authority of how to live righteously. Okay? And so the church has misunderstood what's being said in the New Testament because they think not being under the law means we no longer have to obey it. And that's not what it means. It means it no longer condemns us unless, Hebrews 10:26, we willfully disobey it. If we know what it says and refuse to obey it, we bring condemnation on ourselves again. Paul in Galatians chapter 2, which we'll get to, says that if we are trying to be justified by the law and yet are found sinners, does Messiah become a minister of sin? Does believing in him allow us to continue sinning? And the answer is no. Because if we rebuild what we overthrew in him, meaning if we overcame the condemnation of the law through belief in him, but if we continue willfully disobeying the law and build up that condemnation again, we prove that we're not his. We are proving that we are sinners. See, that's what Paul's trying to say there, but we'll get to that more in depth when the time comes. So in Matthew 15, Messiah is saying, listen, I didn't come to change the authority of the law. The law still has the same authority, and your requirements to it are the same. Okay? What I came to do is fulfill it, it says in the King James. That word to fulfill means to complete, okay? But it's not in the sense of complete it so you don't have to kind of sense. It's in the complete it as a sense of you have a glass that's half full, and I come to fill it up. And it's really talking about understanding, because later on he's going to say, those who hate their brother are guilty of murder, right? Those who look at a woman to lust after her are guilty of adultery. Okay, he's deepening our understanding, filling it up. He's telling us, listen, sin is not just the act of committing sin, it's the desire in your heart to do so. It's a desire in your heart, that hate in your heart, that makes you guilty. Okay, so what did he do? He filled up our understanding, both in the things he said and the examples he set. He came to live out the law to show us. He was a human who obeyed the law to show us that humans could obey the law. We just follow his example. He came to show us how to live righteously before Yahweh. That's pretty simple. Okay. Anyway, going back to Ecclesiastes 3:15. 15 says, "That which has been is now, and that which is to be in the here, which is to be, meaning in the future, has already been." And according to King James, the last part says, "And God requires that which is past." The first section of this is pretty simple. It's the whole saying, "There's nothing new under the sun." Okay, what was in the past, what was true in the past is true now. What it'll be true in the future is still true now. It's the same. There's nothing new. Okay, there's nothing new under the sun. So what that being said and understood, it means there's nothing new in the New Testament. Nothing new. Okay? In fact, all of them quoted the Old Testament to prove the gospel of Messiah. They taught it from the Tanakh, or the Old Testament. There was no New Testament to teach from. Okay? So there's nothing new in the New Testament. Anybody says that doesn't know what they're talking about. Okay? They get confused by the idea that there was an old covenant and now there's a new covenant. In the context, that language is is used, it's not talking about the covenant as a whole. It's referring specifically in Hebrews to the priesthood. Okay, and so there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the words that are being used there and how it's applied, how it should be applied. Just like anything else, you get out of it what you want. If you want the truth, you have to submit all the authority of your life to it. That means you obey it. Okay? If you obey it, then he'll give you understanding. If you're double-minded and want to know but are not willing to obey, that double-mindedness will prevent you from seeing the truth. The truth will be hidden from you. Because in your heart, you don't really want to know it. Okay? You only want a feel-good God that'll make you feel better. Forgive your sin, even though you don't change your life. Anyway, so the first part is about there's nothing new under the sun. Okay? Within this passage, this next part of this passage, there's a word in Hebrew called the et that is not translated. It's in the scripture 5,600 plus times, and it's never translated. And I have a short on this. I plan to put out hopefully about the same time I put this out. That'll help explain that. But the et is basically, it's the first and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the aleph and the tav. And in Revelation, it's what in Revelation said in verse 1:8 says, in chapter 1, verse 8 says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the aleph and the tav, the first and the last. Okay, this aleph and the tav is called the memra by ancient Jewish scholars, and it means word. It's a reference to the word. It's where the word of Elohim is working. The word became flesh in Messiah. So what it's telling you is anytime this word shows up, and you have to go to the Hebrew, you have to go to a Hebrew and to a concordance to find it. But it's in there lots and lots of times. Anytime it's there, it gives you a hint that the word of Elohim is doing the work. Okay? So the word of Elohim and made flesh is Messiah. So that's a hint that something in this passage is about Messiah. There's a messianic work involved any time. Like in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning Elohim created the heavens and the earth. There's an et right there by Elohim, created. Okay, that et is letting us know that it's the word of Elohim that created. And so John, knowing that the et is there, said in the beginning was the word was with Elohim, and the word was Elohim. And that all that was created by him and for him. And the word became flesh and dwelt among us. So this is how that understanding of John saying the word was in the beginning is because the et is in the first verse of Hebrew. In the Hebrew, we don't know that in English because it's not translated. Anyway, there's an et in this passage. So this part that says that God requires what is past, the et is there. That means there's something about the Messiah going on here. Okay? And plus the translation is horrible. The word that is translated as requireth, that God's requiring something. And this passage says requires what is past. So it sounds like God is looking into the past as a sense of judgment. He's requiring from us the things we've done in the past. Where James, I'll get it right, Paul, in Romans chapter 3, verse 25, says that our belief in the blood of Messiah has justified us from the sins of the past. So this sounds contradictory to that. But it sounds contradictory because, one, they don't understand the et is in this passage, and two, they mistranslated this passage. The word requireth, the actual word means to seek, to search out. So it's God is not requiring something of you, but he's looking into something. He's seeking out something. Okay? Searching for something. So Yahweh established this is righteousness, and that's going to be, it was true in the past, it's true now, it'll be true forever. But what Yahweh's really doing is not requiring, but searching. He's trying to figure out something, searching for something. Okay? And it's the part that's translated, that which is past, that just means to run after. Okay? So this passage is saying that Yahweh, God, is searching out. Yahweh is searching out what you are running after, what you're running after. So there's a standard of righteousness. And when he looks at your life and he sees how your life measures up, let's say, to what the law says, he's not measuring how well you obey the law. He's looking at how you are pursuing it. Okay, this really should say that Yahweh is seeking what is pursued. He's seeking what you pursued. He's not thinking about how well you keep the law. He's seeing, is obeying the law your pursuit? Is that what you're trying to do? Okay? And it's a matter of the heart. Okay? What it's saying here is that Yahweh's not, he set this righteousness standard aside. He's established it to be how you live righteously before him. It's a standard how you be holy before him in this physical world. Okay? But even back in the past, when it was given, there's a sign of Messiah there. They're saying this in Messiah, because this is a messianic promise, okay? Everything was founded on messianic promise, but way back in the garden. So Yahweh says, yes, I'm giving you this law, but because of what I'm going to do in Messiah, what I'm going to do in the Word, because of this, I'm not judging you to see how perfectly you obey the Torah. I'm judging you, I'm looking at you, I'm searching out if you're obeying it with all of your heart and all of your mind and all of your strength, which is the command. The command does not say keep it perfectly. The command says do all you can to obey it perfectly. There's a difference in being judged by how well you kept it and being judged about how well you tried to keep it. Did you wake up daily with the intent to obey it with all of your heart? Well, yes, I did. Okay, then if you stumble because of your faith in Messiah, when you stumble, I won't count that against you. Because I know in your heart, you're trying to obey me. This David is a perfect example of this, probably the best example. The whole David's life is an example of serving Yahweh. He loved Yahweh. He wanted to serve Yahweh with all his heart and all his mind and all his strength. He was called the man after Yahweh's own heart. But he also loved women. Okay? And so he saw a woman, the wife of another man, naked, bathing. I want her, went and got her. I had sent somebody for her, brought her back, had sex with her, got her pregnant. When he realized she was pregnant, she called her husband back from the battlefield where he should have been and tried to trick him to get him drunk so he'd go sleep with his wife so he wouldn't get caught for getting her pregnant. But the guy was too honorable, refused to go sleep with his wife while his comrades were in the battle. So what did David do? Well, if David couldn't trick him, then David would have him killed. And that's what he did. David conspired with the general, Joab, to put Uriah at the front of the battle so he'd get killed. And that is what happened. How can a man with Yahweh's own heart, someone that Yahweh considers his king, the example of his own Messiah, be accepted by Yahweh after intentional, he went after this woman and then killed her husband? Well, it's because Yahweh doesn't judge a man by what he does. Yahweh judges a man by what he does in his heart, how his heart leads him, I guess is a better way. Okay? David's whole life is an example of loving and serving Yahweh. This behavior is an abnormality. It's not his lifestyle. His lifestyle is obedience. He just got caught up in his, what Paul calls his flesh, got caught up in his flesh. Okay? Well, we can tell the difference between a man who loves Yahweh, who has Yahweh in his heart, and a man who doesn't by the two kings, Saul and David. When Saul was caught disobeying because he didn't kill the Amalekite king, and he was told to go in and destroy every living thing, man, woman, and child, sheep, dogs, everything, killed it all. Okay, but he didn't. He allowed the people to keep the best animals, and he didn't kill the king. And so, because he didn't obey, and it was proved when he was confronted, he didn't say, oh, I failed. No, he said, listen, it's the people's fault. They wanted this, and they wanted that, and I thought this. When David was confronted by Nathan about what he did to Uriah, Nathan said, you are the man. You are the man who are guilty. And David said, you are right. Got on his face before the father, cried out for the father for the health of the child that was to be born. Yahweh did not spare the child, and David accepted it because Yahweh is righteous and David is not. Okay? David repented, confessed his sin, and moved on in faith. So it was his belief in Elohim that allowed him to remain in Yahweh's good graces as spotless and blameless, even though he was guilty of this physical atrocity. He was guilty of this. In the spiritual, because his heart was sincere in wanting to please Yahweh, when he realized he was guilty, he repented. That sense of contrition is evidence of salvation. It's evidence of righteousness. Only righteous men repent. Unrighteous men don't repent. Okay, so that's the same. It's true, the same now. The only difference is they were looking forward to the physical death of Messiah, and we're looking back to the physical death of Messiah. But spiritually, that death was finished before the foundation of the world. Okay, so in the spiritual sense, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David were all saved by the same faith we're saved by. The promise of Messiah. It's the same faith. There's nothing new. Okay, and this is what it's saying here. It's saying, listen, yes, the law is the standard of righteousness, and you must, every person that calls himself the child of Yahweh, okay, even those who believe in Jesus, have to obey the law. That is the requirement. However, Yahweh's not going to judge you based on how perfectly you obeyed the law. He's going to judge you on how perfectly you committed to doing so. Did you strive every day to obey it? Well, the church does it because their teachers have told them it no longer applies to you because they in their hearts are disobedient, and that disobedience is projected by what they say. And because their heart is disobedient, their mind cannot understand. They're not spiritual. You have to be obedient to be spiritual. Okay, so their lack of obedience makes them unspiritual. So they can't understand spiritual things. So they misunderstand what Paul's saying. And New Testament guys, it's not hard. I'm not saying your pastor's evil. He's just ignorant because he's been fed this garbage. Same garbage he's feeding you is what he was fed. Generations on top of generations. Okay, the New Testament says at Hebrews 4:12, it says, "For the word of Elohim," remember, Messiah is the word of Elohim made flesh, okay? "The word of Elohim is living and working and sharper than any two-edged sword, cutting through even the dividing of the being and the spirit and the joints and the marrow, and is able to judge the thoughts and intents of the heart." The word is about judging the thoughts and intents of the heart. It's not about judging your perfection, how perfect you obeyed it. These people that say, well, the law, James says, if you were to obey the whole law and fail in one point, you're guilty of all. Well, yes, that is true. But from the context James is saying that, he's talking about, what is he talking about there? He's talking about, listen, you see a brother in need and you say, go and be well, but don't do anything to help him. That's not obeying the law. That's disobeying the law. Okay. And if you're trusting in, if your hope and trust is in how well you keep the law, if your hope and trust is in the law itself, which is what the Jews were teaching, their hope and faith was in their genealogies and the fact that Yahweh had given them the Torah, that Yahweh had spoke to them from the mountain. It was all based on these things, physical things, not based on their spiritual life, their spiritual relationships. It wasn't based on that. It was based on this physical stuff. Okay? And Paul's saying, listen, that physical stuff is no guarantee that you're going to get it. Okay? Because your relationship has to be personal in the sense that it's got to be something intimate inside you. Okay? Messiah, Yahweh created you like himself so that he could commune with you, to have this relationship with you. It was our disobedience that separated us from that communion. You can no longer have this relationship with us because our disobedience has separated us. Messiah died to restore that, so the spirit man inside of us that's like Yahweh could be born again. So now we can have that relationship again. If our heart and mind and strength is focused on pleasing Yahweh according to his will through obedience, according to following the example of his Son, who was resurrected as proof that he's the Son. We're struggling to be like the Son, and our struggle to be like the Son, even though we fail sometimes, it's that struggle that's going to give us victory so that we are resurrected, born again in the physical man, as the complete, full sons of Elohim, just like Messiah. But it has to do with how we live as believers. Paul says in Galatians, he's talking about the fruits of the spirits and the works of the flesh and the fruit of the spirit. That means there's a works of the spirit that's not mentioned there. Okay, well, the works of the Spirit, the walking in the Spirit that he mentions, is always about the Torah. Okay, the law. The law is holy, just, and good, and it's spiritual, according to Romans 7. If a person wants to be holy, just, and good, and spiritual, the law is how you do it in the physical sense. That's about physical justification, physical righteousness. Yes, we inherited spiritual righteousness, the inner man made right again, through belief. No amount of works would do that because he was already condemned to death. But belief in Messiah made that man alive again, so now we can commune with Yahweh the way we're supposed to. But to commune with Yahweh, you have to obey. Just like in a garden, if you just choose to disobey, well, then you break communion. That doesn't change. That is true. The Torah, or the law, is how you maintain communion. You get back into communion with Yahweh through belief in Yeshua. That bridge has been fixed. To remain in communion, well, you have to live in obedience with all your heart and all your mind and your strength. Do your best every day. John says those who are in Messiah, us, they do not sin. That means they do not disobey the law. Their lifestyle is one of obedience to the law. Okay? But if we do sin, meaning along the way, I do a David and let my flesh take control of me, I have an advocate in the kingdom, in the heavens, okay, that if I confess my sins, that he is faithful and just to forgive me of my sins and cleanse me from all unrighteousness. Well, because that's how the system works. Works for David, works for Abraham, works for me, works for you. But for it to work, we have to be men and women who have proved that we are after Yahweh's heart. And we do that through obeying him, his Torah. Messiah says, John says in 1 John 5, he says, we know we love the children of Elohim when we love Elohim and keep his commandments. And he says, and we know that we love Elohim when we keep his commandments, and they are not burdensome to us. Well, if you claim to be a child of Yahweh through belief in Yeshua, but the idea of changing the way you eat is offensive to you, or to stop practicing pagan things is offensive to you, then you're the problem. Then maybe you're not his children. Maybe he justified you because justification is free. It doesn't cost anything. It's free to anyone that asks. But sonship and inheritance, well, that you have to walk towards. Okay, that you have to be holy for. Okay, when Paul says the people who practice this and practice that, those people shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim, he's referring to us, believers who practice such things shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. That my pencil. Okay? There's no warnings for the world in the Bible. All these warnings are for believers. Okay? When the Bible warns you that you need to do something right, or you might get in the lake of fire, he's talking to you, not talking to the world. Okay. It's important that we understand, okay, that Yahweh has established his law is the way of righteous living. It's the same yesterday, today, and forever. It's never going to change. Believers who claim to be him, both native-born and stranger Gentiles who join in covenant with him, should be obeying the law, because the law is how we determine whether we are righteous and holy or not. The law is how we do that. Okay, justification is how we became alive again from the dead. So justification is what he did for us to heal communion. Sanctification or obedience is how we live in communion, so that when he returns, we can join him in communion of the everlasting life. Sonship at the glorification. Justification he did. Glorification he's going to do. We have to live sanctified. That he's the author, the justifier, and the finisher, the resurrector. We have to comply in the center. Anybody that tells you otherwise doesn't know the scripture. So I'd be very leery of them. Okay, I hope this is helpful, and may Yah bless you and keep you. Good day.